We are entering in this morning to a brand new series, a teaching series we're calling Answers. Answers to credible answers to important questions about God. I believe that any question you would have about a supreme being, a God, over your life is an important question for your life. I'd hope you'd agree with that statement. I just truly believe it. It was very much for me. And I would trust that it would be for you or anyone you would know. Anyone that might reside in your home, might reside around your home, might be those who sit next to you in cubicles or in your industry or career, that as they would have questions about God, those are very important questions. And so we want to be, not only have answers for our own selves, we want to have answers for others as well. We're going to just examine 5 questions over a period of 5 weeks in this teaching series. Between now and Easter, which is coming on April 1st this year, very quickly. And it's exciting times for our church because we're going to be expanding to 2 services on Sunday mornings just because of the numbers of people that are coming and wanting to engage in the life of the branch and the mission and purpose of the branch. And so as we ramp up to Easter, we'll see that. We'll be going through some times where we'll talk about the exciting expansions here. And then following Easter, our goal would be to just retain those. As you know, lots of people like to come at Easter. You might be thinking about some people that you'd like to invite to come to the branch on Easter Sunday. Be thinking, and even if you're led to pray about some opportunities to invite and to help people come to know why you attend the branch at this season in your life. So there's some super exciting things. We're going to start out with question number 1. Is God real? Now, some of us in the room are saying, well, duh, I believe God's real. I say, okay, I hope you do. But the question isn't just for us to have, a plausible or credible answer for, but it's for others as well. And so perhaps if someone were to come up to you in your work environment, know that you attend a church, maybe they would ask you at some point in time, is God really real? You believe that? I think you believe that he exists. Why would you say that he exists? In other words, they have some questions. Maybe they're a bit skeptical. Maybe they've had some God in their past, but haven't really over the numbers of years pursued answers to whether or not God really exists or doesn't exist. And so it's a good question to ask, at least to start out this series with, when we're talking about credible answers to important questions about God. Let me give you, as we start out this answer to a question that could be on a lot of people's minds, or at least in the case of, do I have good answers for those questions if they're asked of me? Let's ask why people would question whether God is real. There are numbers of reasons why people would say, I'm not sure whether God is real. Or I do question whether or not he truly exists. And so some of those, and these are simple statements that would express doubt or have at least the question out there as to whether or not God is true, whether he's real, whether he exists. One would be religious confusion and division all around us in the world. Isn't that so? There are people that have varieties of viewpoints about God. And they're conflicting in many cases. That would cause some people to say, I don't know about what I should believe in, because you believe in one thing over here and you believe in another thing over there, and you're saying this about God, or you're saying simply, why trust in something you can't see? You can't see God. And so there's that. And I tell you, from my perspective, when I was going through a questioning time about God, this was very real to me. I saw religious confusion. And that bothered me. Now, I was raised going to church every single Sunday since I was born. But I still came to a place in my early 20s where I questioned, because of understanding the varieties of paths and philosophy about God, that I wanted to know more. I wasn't convinced. I needed to be convinced. Here's another one. There's just simply a societal mistrust of religious charlatans, aren't there? There's some religious charlatans out there that's all they want is your money in the end, and power for themselves, and acclaim in many cases. We've known some, and you could probably name some. And so that would put a doubt in the minds of sincere seekers in answer of the question, is God real? Or what about this whole idea that if I do find God, and maybe if he is real, that'll put me under accountability to God. And that's kind of a scary thing. It might mean that I have to reform something in my life or change something. And a lot of people are simply resistant to reform and change. Let's just suppress that whole idea and not pursue it. Education, especially education with regard to evolution, can actually accept God from life entirely. Take God out of any answer to the big questions about life. How did I get here? Why am I here? Where am I going? The big philosophical questions are trying to be answered in many cases by other theories. And how about this? There's simply a lack of empirical evidence. That is, evidence that regards our senses, empirical evidence. God cannot be put in the test tube, we say. He can't be handled in that way. He is, by definition, invisible. He is spirit. And so I can't say, here is God, people, and put him before you and have you come to worship that being, because he doesn't, in the sense of appear. We can't touch him like we've touched each other and greeting each other this morning. That's the way God is. He's that way. So it requires a faith. Here's another one that people have said. I've tried to pray to God, and I don't think he's there because I don't get the answers that I'm looking for. Okay? And maybe there's some in this room that could say that to some extent. Let's face it, friends, theism, or the idea of God, does have its unexplainable. God is beyond us. If he's truly the God that we ascribe to have been the creator of all, he is a being that's far beyond our finiteness. He is an infinite one or being. And so these are some of those, questions that people would bring up. I'm going to kind of focus on a couple here that I think are critically important for us and were for me. Many people question and don't get good answers to, is God real? Because they're ignorant of the evidence for the existence of God, for the reality of God. They don't know the evidence. Or they may know it, but they lack honest examination of some of that evidence for their own life. They dismiss it too easily and move on to what they think is better explanation. So I want us to focus in on the evidence. And I do this every couple years I have in ministry. We have what's called an evidences series. It's called Apologetics in the academic world, a defense for the faith. That is, to look at the evidences that would point to and support the idea of a real God. And so I want us to do that over the next several weeks. We're going to have a couple weeks that'll interrupt in there, some exciting stuff that we've got coming up, but we're going to have 5 lessons before Easter dealing with these areas that, friends, for me, even after 27 years in ministry where I'm teaching God, right, are always an encouragement to my faith. That means they build me up. and make me like, yeah, this is so true. You know, there's nothing that can be compared to the evidences for the existence of the God of the Bible. Nothing on the planet. And I keep searching to see, look, I've got to be straight with this because I've turned my whole life, my whole career, my whole ending of my life, I'm in this all the way. I want to be sure. See, here's my problem. Well, it's not really a problem. I look at it now as a backdrop that pushes me to examine the evidences for a real God. You know what that is? I was deceived twice in my life. Now, I could have been deceived more than that because I don't know that I was deceived. This idea of deception. You don't know. You're following something you think is true, and you find out that it wasn't. And I hate that. Do you too? I don't like being deceived. I don't like following a course and then get to the end of it and says, this was the wrong hill to climb. What did I do? The right hill is over there. I don't want to be there again. It happened to me once in business. I was selling something with the idea that I was offering a special promotion. I was hoodwinked like crazy. And I came to find out that that wasn't true. This is just the normal price for everybody. And I couldn't sell it anymore. I couldn't sell it with that reasoning. That bothered me so much. I said, I don't want to ever be under that kind of deceptive influence again. So I go a little beyond, to try to make sure that I'm not being deceived. Now, I'm as human as the next person and probably dumber than most, so I'm going to probably be deceived about stuff. And so but the goal is try to find the evidences, try to find the supports for what is true, what is right. And then I believed I was deceived with regard to religion. This is the second time I was deceived. And, I found my way out of that by studying the Bible. If you study this, you will determine what's counterfeit. Now, you can go and study all the counterfeits to the faith that you want. There's a never-ending thing. But if you know what's in here for your life and you trust this, then you'll be able to spot counterfeit. You'll be able to spot something that's not quite right. It might be a partial truth, but even the devil used partial truth. But he was trying to trip up Jesus, and he will the rest of us as well. And so that's where we're going. So I want to be able to, in my own heart and life, I want to be able to defend why I believe what I believe, and I want to be able to help another person to come to some understanding if they're seeking answers for their own faith. And it starts with, is God real? Is there a true God? Do we have any evidence to support that would point to that would be, really compelling evidence? I can't put that down. I gotta pursue that. Here's a great verse that is the apologetic or evidences verse of the Bible. It'll be on the screen. It was recorded over in a book called 1 Peter chapter 3. Here it is. But in your heart set apart Christ as Lord. Lord means he's the master. He's the boss. He's the king. Always be prepared. Look what it says there. This is written to you and to me. Always be prepared. This is one of the reasons why we do these series. Always be prepared to answer, to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give a reason. I love the word reason. I underlined it. That's my emphasis, underlined in italic that word reason for the hope that you have. Do this with gentleness and respect. I like the word reason because I'm an analytical guy. I'm not I cry at some movies, but for the most part, you're not going to convince me with just subjective stuff. Give me some hard evidence. Give me some stuff that I can work with my mind. Don't give me soft, emotional, appealing kind of approaches to me turning over my life, surrendering my life to God that I can't see, and that I'm going to try to convince other people of all my life. So I like this reason. There's a reason we can give. Christian faith or trust in God is not blind. Let me say that again. Christian faith or trust in God is not blind. You won't be blind if you walk through this series. If you feel like you might be in some ways now, you won't be, because you're going to find reasons for the hope that you would have in the real God and the God of the Bible. Christianity holds up, I suggest to you and submit to you, under close investigation and scrutiny. Put the faith under the microscope in this series, will you? And you won't do it just here on Sundays. I'm going to give you some places you can go to hear the questions and to hear the answers that are given by those who would be apologists for the faith, that have dealt with it and, become more expert in those kinds of answers. And so, is faith in God and reason in my mind mutually exclusive? No. It can't be. Because I've got to have reason in my mind to be able to construct a valid faith for me. Okay? It's built on reason, built on evidence. And so it's not a contradiction to have rational faith, a reasonable faith. That's not contradictory to me. Okay? So that's what you're going to get from me teaching this series. It's going to be based on evidences. So Jesus convinced people by using the evidences that pointed to and logically support the reality of God. Here's a couple of verses. Believe me, Jesus said, when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. But look what he goes on to say. At least believe on the evidence of the miracles themselves. People could see these miracles, supernatural things done by Jesus that would point to and provide support and evidence for who he claimed to be, the very Son of God, God in the flesh. And then there's another one. After his suffering, he showed himself to these men and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. He appeared to them over a period of 40 days and spoke about the kingdom of God. This was after Jesus rose from the dead. He stayed on earth in his new body for a period of 40 days, the purpose upon which was to give reasonable support evidence to these guys, his disciples, who would be eyewitnesses. Eyewitness testimony is powerful testimony in the court of law today. You got eyewitness testimony? Watch out. You're done. What we have in the Bible is eyewitness testimony. It's not just circumstantial stuff. If we're thinking of this legally, this is deadly stuff. It's provable. It's like, that's true. There was an eyewitness. That's what we would want. And that's what we have in the testimony of the Bible. These guys connected with Jesus, and Jesus gave proofs that he was alive from the dead, that Jesus is raised from the dead. Easter's coming, and that's our great hope. Now, that's that we have our sins wiped out, that we have a forgiveness, that we're no longer guilty, but we have now a new life with the Holy Spirit in us, and regenerated life to live with new power. For God, to have that down payment for our future inheritance in heaven. Okay, so we are to love our God with, Jesus said, all our heart, all our soul, all our strength, and all our mind. We are to worship, that is to love God, not just with strength where we come together and we serve, not just with our heart. That God he appeals to our heart, yeah, but we're to love him with our reason, with our logic, with our mind. We're to put that to work, to understand the God who obviously has an intellect, doesn't he? I was just like, oh man, he's incredible mind of God. And we're to love him with that. Okay, we're going to look at 3 reasons to believe God is real. And I want to try to send you home with a word or two for each of them that gives you something you're equipped with to be able to express this to other people. These are really fairly simple, but you got to wrap your mind around them. Hopefully you can get something out of this. Number 1, the first reason to believe that God is real is nature itself. Nature, I'm referring to creation. I'm referring to what we have out here in our world as you go out for a walk or as you go into the woods for a hike or as you just drive down the road and notice the scenery or the sunset. General observation concludes that everything has a first cause. There's this law of cause and effect. Everything has a first cause. And so nothing, we say, comes from nothing. Can't get something from nothing. There's always a prior cause for something that happens. So this table is here because of a number of activities that brought it to be. You are here because somebody prodded you out of bed this morning. Boom, you're not going to be here unless there's a prior cause that got you here. When I was young, I didn't have a sense of money. So, I just wanted money from my parents when I was a little kid. Money, money, money. And my parents would say, money doesn't grow on. You've heard it too. That's what you thought it was. It's there. It comes from nothing. No, it comes from someplace. It's hard to get. It's just a law of life. It's a scientific law that we obviously have to live in and abide in. It just is true. And so here's the thing. Everything has a first cause, which, by the way, just throw this out. We'll have a Q&A thing on science and faith. It'll be another couple weeks away, but think about it. Evolutionary origins are at some point unexplainable. If everything has a first cause, you have to go back and say, well, what's the cause of that? Well, you've got an amoeba in a mud puddle. Well, what caused that? Well, you have this Big Bang. Well, what caused the Big Bang? And where were the elements from with the Big Bang? I mean, you can keep going back and drawing back, and you got to keep coming up with explanations. So here's the deal with God. God is this uncaused first cause. God is the prime or first mover. By its very definition, God is self-existent. Okay. I can't wrap my brain around that. Anybody with me? That's pretty hard for us because we're finite. We're the created. We came from somewhere, and origins theories are always trying to figure that out. Well, Christianity has an origin theory too. So my deal when I was investigating was, which theory is most plausible? Which theory is most credible as an answer to origins? And friends, I haven't found a theory yet that beats the theory that there is a supreme, self-existent being who brought all that we understand about creation to be. I haven't found anything in all of science, in all of atheistic literature, in all of those who are agnostics and are trying to probe all this stuff. I just still haven't found it. If you have a better answer, please come to me because I'm ever searching for what is real, what corresponds to what's true, what actually exists. I don't want to be deceived about my future should I drive away from here today and you never see me again because I get hit out here on the roads, crazy roads that would take my life. That's where I'm coming from, friends. So I propose that to you. There's a first cause that is God, the self-existent God. Now, another observation in this area of nature, just to throw into the mix here, because you could remember this, nature. If somebody asks you, why do you believe in God? Well, without even using the Bible, I haven't asked you to pick up the Bible. We've only shown one verse, but we don't have to use the Bible to give people something to think about with regard to pointing them to God, evidences that point to God. The other one is this idea of design. Everything out here, everything you see, this table, your bodies are are filled with design. Everything up here is design. Your phones, everything is designed. We all know this. It's this intuitive things. But design demands a designer. All of design demands a designer. This challenges the theory of infinite time, billions and billions and billions of years, and chance. Design always challenges that. It's just like they're so far polar opposites. Infinite time and chance brought all this to be? Wait a minute. Is that true? Well, that's what I was asking myself. Is that really true? I've got several books up here. There's all kinds of books written about evidence that demands a verdict. Josh McDowell's a classic. I'm holding this one, Reason to Believe by R.C. Sproul. Here's one I'm going to quote from right now. It's called Know Why You Believe by Paul Little. And he says this about design. No one would think a computer would come into being without an intelligent designer. Right. Of course. How much more credible is it to believe that the universe, in its infinite complexity, could have happened by chance? The human body, for instance, is an admittedly astounding and complex organism, a continual marvel of organization, design, and efficiency. So impressed was Albert Einstein with this that he said, now this is a little lofty, but try to grasp it with me, will you? My religion, Albert Einstein said, consists of a humble admiration of the illuminant, superior spirit who reveals himself in the slight details we are able to perceive with our frail and feeble minds. That deeply emotional conviction of the presence of a superior reasoning power, which is revealed in the incomprehensible universe, forms my idea of God. Albert Einstein. Pretty cool. Darwin himself. Everybody knows about Darwin. In a chapter titled Difficulties with the Theory, from his Origin of Species book, states this. This is in that book. To suppose that the eye, your eyeball, your eye, with so many parts all working together, could have been formed by natural selection, the process of evolution, seems, he says, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. Bible has this testimony which reveals the designer, God, and I'll share some scripture. The uncaused first cause, the prime mover. It says, the very first verse of the Bible, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Psalm 102, in the beginning, you, that's God, laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. And then Matthew 19, Jesus' words, haven't you read? Pointing to the Bible. Next week, be here. We're going to talk about this amazing book. The book that, if you have to know only one book in the whole world, this is the book. This is the book that you would want to know. Haven't you read? Jesus replied that at the beginning, look what he says, at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female. Male and female. So, the question, what is the explanation for the existence of the world? The evidence, a credible answer in my mind, in what research I've done on this, friends, is that it makes reasonable sense to believe in the real God, which is spoken about as being the creator, self-existent, almighty, all-powerful God that's revealed more specifically, especially through the verbal revelation called the Bible in our hands, okay? All right, secondly, first reason to believe God is real, nature. Second reason, human nature. Human nature. Human nature testifies that man is incurably religious. Sorry, we're all kind of religious and we have one bent for it or another. If people just are, they look outside themselves. Man is a worshiping creature, is what human history testifies. In fact, modern anthropologists have determined that humanity, educated or uneducated, whether he lived in ancient time or modern period, wherever found in whatever century, whatever part of the world, he has been found to be a worshiping creature. Now he worships something, and you know, it might be called idol worship in the, different, there's always something outside of ourselves we're trying to worship. This is called the argument for the existence of the real God from intuition. We are intuitive with this. Humans are. You are. I am. Everybody around us with us intuitive. Look outside of ourselves. And if you've ever been to the Washington Monument, That's the one that goes up the highest, right, in Washington, D.C. If you've been there and you're standing underneath of it, what do you want to do constantly? It's just intuitive. It's just an intuitive thing. That's the way we are with a being outside of ourselves, or a reason for why we're here, something that's greater than us to help explain why we're here. It's an intuitive argument. I don't have to pick up the Bible to do that. You just have to observe human nature throughout history. And all across the world, everybody's worshiping something. It's an argument for the existence of a real God, because we are intuitively tuned in to doing that. And so it begs the question, why is man a worshiping creature? I suggest to you that's an evidence for the existence of a real God as an answer. Okay, thirdly, reasons for the belief. God is real, one nature. Second one is that human nature. And the third one is an inner nature, or you could substitute moral nature. This is a good one, a real big one. Moral nature. Humanity universally has an inner moral sense. We all have this inner moral rudder, that sense that kind of is a guide to us. It's remarkably consistent as it's seen transcultural, historical, in nearly every single culture across the world. There is preferred truth-telling over deceitfulness, kindness over violence, loyalty over backstabbing, love over hate, justice over injustice. It asks the question, how does one account for this fact of a kind of inner moral nature stamped within people's hearts? How do we account for that? We have this innate capacity to know right from wrong. Batsell Barrett Baxter, try to say that 3 times real fast. I believe because, again, another book that deals with why could we believe what we believe about the God of the Bible. And he shares this. In his critique of practical reason, critique of practical reason, Immanuel Kant, some of you may know that philosopher, wrote, "Two things fill the mind with admiration and awe." What are those two things? The starry heavens above and the moral law within. Interesting. Now, Baxter says about that, this sense of ought, that moral sense within man, is not merely the result of the mores or customs of his culture. Rather, it is the innate capacity to know right from wrong. That man has this capacity can hardly be explained unless there is a moral governor of the universe. It implies a moral creator God. It is universally observed that human beings try to convince themselves that their actions are right and justifiable. They desire the approval of their consciences as well as the approval of their fellow men. It is unreasonable, is it, he asks, unreasonable to assume that the presence of a moral nature in man is an indication of a moral governor? Why should man be concerned with the demands of conscience if he is nothing more than a chance combination of atoms? Friends, I think that's a powerful one. And all this does is kind of show us that there could be a very real God that is explainable to some degree, or an answer for his existence, his being true, by just this small amount of evidence, which looms very large in our lives, if we think about it. I want you to consider looking at some of what resources that are online about this. We have a couple of, we have Right Now Media that has some incredible things. If you have not on Right Now Media, just put RNM on your connection card when you turn in today, and we will get you the free subscription to get on Right Now Media. And go to Evidences. Just type in Evidences on the search. There's like over 10,000 videos on there, teaching videos. And you can get Ravi Zacharias, an incredible apologist. And I would just strongly recommend that. And some of the stuff's a little over our head, a little over my head anyway. It might not be for you, but it's good stuff. And they take questions and answers. Another guy that you can just get, I get on my cell phone, and I love just hearing the banter back and forth, is a guy named Frank Turek. And he deals with this website called crossexamine.org. So I'm just going to have him kind of introduce his little theory about faith right now. So we're going to watch that short video.
Well, there are two kinds of faith. There's belief that and belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the Bible is true. That's what apologetics does. It gives you evidence, reasons to believe that something actually occurred or is true. But belief in is usually what the Bible means by the word faith. And the better word in the Bible would be the word trust, to trust in. So there's belief that, and then there's belief in. Now, James, the half-brother of Jesus, wrote that little book called James, and he says, even the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble. Why? Because they don't trust in Christ for salvation. They know intellectually better than we do that God exists, but they don't trust in him. So to go from belief that to belief in is to go from an intellectual assent to a volitional acceptance. And so everybody, to a certain extent, knows there's a creator God. They believe that God exists. Some people suppress that. But to go from belief that to belief in is more a step of the will.
Okay, so when I was dealing with this whole thing about, do I really believe that God exists, and then if I believe that God exists and I can understand that he is the God of the Bible, which we'll talk about next week, about this book is a supernatural book, okay? And we'll deal with this being the communication from God to humanity, okay? Then there's what's inside of it that we must grapple with. And that's where we get into this idea of Jesus. Hey, he's inside this. We deal with our situation in our lives, and that's what the Bible does. And so we'll be taking steps more and more into that. On the connection cards that you have, we just invite you to turn these in. We don't force anybody to. We'd love to, but we're not going to do that. We just love to know that you're here. You give us a record of your attendance. It helps us not just with responding to you. Thank you for coming and being part of the services, but it also helps us with those who weren't able to be here. And as we grow, that becomes increasingly more difficult for us to figure out. So these cards are useful to us. You might find that they're useful to you personally if you want to put down a prayer request. They're prayed over the course of this next week, and or any steps you might want to take toward God. And maybe you've been like, belief that God exists isn't a big deal to you. Okay, I believe he exists. But maybe it's about that belief in, that faith in God and Jesus Christ. That's the struggle. So if that's the case, and you'd like to have somebody help you through that, I'd love to be part of that in your journey. If I can be of assistance, or come to the next several lessons or teaching time here. We have a significant learning time to help us to grow and to learn more about this amazing God. Well, one of the things that we do, and Jesus asks us to do week by week, we do it at the branch, is to express our faith in, our trust in, our belief in Jesus by taking communion. If that's something you'd like to do, it's available to you. There's 2 stations here. Just right where I'm pointing. So you have to get up in this next song where we worship and get communion, bring it back to your place. You have some time then also to complete this. If you'd like to turn that in, we'd love that. And then we'll after that, we'll go into our final song. So I'm going to pray, and then we're going to worship together as a response to God and his word. Oh God, we are so grateful to you this morning for showing us your reality through just what you've created. Not just out here in the world that you've created, but we are in that world, and we have this human nature and this inner moral nature that God really does show us that you are real. Thank you for these evidences. Thank you for giving us a rational, reasonable thinking mind that we can grapple with this. Thank you that you want us to, process doubt and skepticism, that you're open to investigation. You called Thomas to check out the scars of your death. Oh, we are so grateful that you're willing to just take us where we are and help us to move forward toward you, toward an eternity. An amazing thing that we have to know you as the real God. Would you receive our worship right now as we respond to you in communion, as we just share our hearts to you perhaps in prayer, as we maybe take a step, maybe make a decision. In Jesus' name, amen.